It will be forgotten. Thank you for your grace. Amen. Imagine. Now, Basson often says that is my favorite word. It's one of my favorite words. But imagine this. You have a dream, or you have a project, an endeavor. You have an invention. You have a proposal of sort. You have an idea for a community project. So you have this thing is in your heart. And at some point, as you think about making this a reality, you realize that there is one person in the world that can make this dream come true, that can make this invention, this project, this community outreach come a reality. So I have a question for you. Imagine, keep on imagining, that you are given a chance to meet such a person. However, to present your idea, your project, you only have about 30 to 60 seconds. In fact, you have the opportunity of making what is referred to as an elevator pitch. The elevator pitch, for those of you who do not know this expression, it's a business thought or a communication idea which says you have to present a concept in the time that it takes for an elevator to go from floor A to floor whatever. Now, if you had to do the elevator pitch in Georgia, we have to be very quick because we unfortunately have not very tall buildings. Hopefully you're in New York, so you got some time to do your elevator pitch. But the point is, the question really isn't what you're going to say. Now, you imagine this? Have you imagined that or not? Hopefully you carry something in your heart that you can pitch. And now as you're in this elevator, you're in the elevator, you're with this person of influence, you have the opportunity to make this pitch, and you do it, you come out of the lift. The question I have to ask you is, what will that pitch tell us about you? What will that pitch tell us about you? Why am I saying this? Because if you have only 30 seconds to say something, you will say something in the most accurate way, the most focused, and you're not going to waste word, are you? Because if you waste any word by taking something from Genesis 1, by the time they reach the floor, you haven't even started yet. You start to say, at some point, years ago, the guy is busy. You have to get to the point quickly. And because that is so short and concise, it will reveal something about you. And it will reveal something about your heart. Why am I saying this? Because what we're going to read now, it's a portion of Nehemiah. We are doing Nehemiah. It's from chapter 1, verse 11 to chapter 2, verse 10. So it's about 11 verses. So this is not going to be very long, don't worry, hopefully. And these 11 verses are, in one word, Nehemiah's elevator pitch. These are Nehemiah's elevator pitch. And beside what the pitch says, I would like us to discover what this piece of information, what this presentation tells us about Nehemiah, and therefore learn from the things that this pitch reveals about him. You got it? Hopefully you're intrigued. If you're not intrigued, you have to wait a little bit longer. If you're intrigued, then you must wait eagerly to the end, because we will reveal this only at the end. But let's start from chapter 1, verse 11. Before I start, I want to mention that this elevator pitch of Nehemiah is demarcated, is distinguished, is marked by 2 tracks. So watch out for these 2 tracks. I'll mention it now so that, spoiler alert, the 2 tracks are prayer and favor. So this elevator track, this elevator pitch that Nehemiah does is marked by these 2 things. You will see prayer and favor keeps on popping up all the time. Let's start from verse 11, chapter 1. Oh Lord, please hear my prayer. I said prayer is one of the tracks. Listen to the prayers of those of us who delight in honoring you. Please grant me success today. When did Nehemiah ask for success? Today. Not tomorrow, today. By making the king favorable to me. Here's the other word, prayer and favor. Here's the second word, favor. Put into his heart to be kind to me. Does Nehemiah's prayer get answered that day? No. Wow. It's terrible. It's even in the Bible. This man says, please grant me success today, and success is not given to him on that day. Shocking. Chapter 2, verse 1. Early the following spring, I could actually read these 4 months later. You know, in the movies, you see this scene and then it says 4 months later. So 4 months later, during the 20th year of King Artaxerxes' reign, I was serving the king his wine. Let me pause there for a second. This is important little detail. Because whatever we are going to read, this speech of Nehemiah happens while he's doing his job. Nochal. No, think about it. We often think that the things of the Lord happens while we're doing our job. They don't happen on top of a mountain while we mystically pray. They happen why? While we're doing our job. So maybe you must take your job more seriously. Maybe do it better. Because you see, something important is we forever live our life as Christians waiting for that moment of being released. Nehemiah was doing his job. Wow. He was doing it well because to be the cupbearer of the king, it's a big deal. And this is not any king. This is the most influential king of that time. This is the king of one of the greatest kingdom of empires of all times. One of the empires that had so much advancement in technology and in culture is remarkable. So this is not any king. This is the king of kings at that time, from a human perspective. So I was serving the king his wine. I had never before appeared sad in his presence. And now you may say, why is this important? It's coming. Why is it important? So the king asked me, why are you looking so sad? You don't look sick to me. You must be deeply troubled. Then I was terrified. Why? Why was Nehemiah terrified? Because you see, this king, this distinguished king, had a court. And in his court, there was one simple rule. No one upsets the king, and no one can appear in his presence while mourning or being sad. And when Nehemiah says, then I was terrified, translating means this is, I might die right now. So Nehemiah chose to go to the king sadly, or in mourning in a sense, and that was not allowed. In fact, in Esther 4, you know the book of Esther, there's a guy called Mordecai. And he's mourning because they have passed this law that they will kill all the Jews. And he goes to the king, but he's not permitted to enter because he's in mourning clothes. Now Nehemiah is mourning, but he's at the king. So it literally he's at his mercy. Now here comes the beginning of the pitch. But I replied, long live the king. How can I not be sad, for the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. So Nehemiah is doing his job, and he's very honest. He's not covering this up, even though he could die. Because, as you would read here, it says a few times, if it pleases the king. And if you were sad, it didn't please the king. And if the king wasn't pleased, whatever unsettled the king was brutally removed by the removal of your head. It wasn't just removed from the king's presence, it was removed, period. To never speak after this ever again. Now, we laugh, but we don't understand what being a subject of a king meant in this time. The king owned the land. The king owned everything. The king owned the air you were breathing. If the king thought you had enough air, that was it. That was it. Your allotment of air was given and you would die. So long live the king. How can I not be sad? For the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins and the gates have been destroyed by fire. Despite all of this, despite all the dangers that Nehemiah is facing, because he's essentially risking his life, that's why he says, I was terrified, he's honest. And his honesty causes the following. Then the king asked, well, how can I help you? Wow. Ding, the lift closes, we're going up. The business guy says, okay, let me hear your idea. You got my attention. You got 30 seconds, 45 seconds to tell me, well, how can I help you? Before I tell you what Nehemiah asks of him, I just want to do a little, rewind a little. Remember the day we read in verse 11 of chapter 1? Oh Lord, hear my prayers. Listen to the prayers of those of us who are delighted in honoring you. Please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Put into his heart to be kind to me. He prayed. 4 months later, there's the answer. Was his prayer effective or not? Did he see the result in that instant? He didn't. But here he says, what is very intriguing for me, please grant me success today by making the king favorable to me. Is it possible, is it plausible that the king's kindness and favor towards Nehemiah was birthed on that day? Is it possible that on that day the king saw something that Nehemiah was doing? Or the king was told by someone about Esther, which is possibly that was the queen of his father. It was not his mom, according to a lot of historical facts, but could have been, it was still there. Esther's story was still there, how she saved the Jews. Is it possible that on the day when Nehemiah prayed, something entered into the heart of the king that only manifested 4 months later? There is so I want you to remember this. I would like to call this the butterfly effect. You know what the butterfly effect is? It's a scientific term to describe how something small can have huge repercussions given some time. In fact, it takes the name, the butterfly effect, from the concept that a butterfly could theoretically cause an hurricane, given all set of circumstances. The flapping of the wings of a butterfly could cause, given a set of circumstances, a hurricane. Think of this, a seed. A seed is very small, isn't it? But if you plant it, given time, it might bring forth so much fruit that could feed so many people. The butterfly effect. Prayer is based on this concept. The butterfly effect. It's even a beautiful name. It's easy to remember. So when you pray, we want to see it right now because we live in this society where we order something online at 10, we want to have it by 4. And in the big city, in Joburg and Cape Town, they even do that. If we live in George, it takes 1 day longer. But hey, if it's not here tomorrow, hey, where's my package? We live in a society that pre-makes food so that we can have it quickly. In this society, the butterfly effect is not very well seen because it takes some time. But prayer is like that. Please grant me success today. Only 4 months later, we see that prayer was answered. It took 4 months to be manifested. We also see something interesting with this reply of Nehemiah. Loving the king, how can I not be said, for the city where my ancestors are buried is in ruins, and the gates have been destroyed by fire. He is sad not because he is struggling. He is sad because his people are struggling. In fact, actually, Nehemiah is in a very good position from a human point of view. He is well looked after by the king. You see, the king actually loves him. If you see this, he's got a good position. He's got a position of influence. So he's doing well. But he could have said something else. You know, dear king, I'm thinking of when I grow old and I no longer can serve the king, who will look after me? Huh? You know, my son is not doing so well in his finances. Would it be possible for the king to just help him? Could Nehemiah said that? But somehow he is not self-absorbed or self-centered. And as he speaks to the king in this elevator pitch of note, once in a lifetime opportunity, he doesn't think of himself, he thinks of his people. But anyway, let's go on. But I want you to notice this. Nehemiah lives a selfless life, which comes back just now when we wrap these things up. Nehemiah continues. The king asks, well, how can I help you? Remember that? Here can start the elevator pitch. With prayer to the God of heaven, I replied. Isn't that incredible? I told you that there are two tracks on this elevator pitch. The one is prayer, the other one is favor. Before he speaks, what does Nehemiah do? Prays. But how do you pray and speak at the same time? It's difficult, isn't it? Unless you used to have a life of prayer, where you understand that communion with God goes beyond words. Where you go, God, guide me. This is incredible for me. It points out to one of the conclusions I'll make today, but I'm not going to reveal it yet. But this is exceptional. Nehemiah is praying while he's speaking. If it pleases the king, and if you are pleased with me, your servant, send me to Judah to rebuild the city where my ancestors are buried. His first request is to take a leave of absence. Number one. The king, with the queen sitting beside him. Sorry, I let my imagination run earlier. Do you remember when the king is favorable to him? Is it possible that perhaps this queen is Esther's daughter? And as she looks at the queen, she is reminded of Esther. Just I thought that. Anyway. All I'm saying is it's incredible how the favor of God is linked to so many things, and how what happened in the king's mind, we don't know. But we do know that the answer to the prayer 4 months earlier came at that moment. The king with the queen sitting beside him asked, how long will you be gone? When will you return? After I told him how long I would be gone, the king agreed to my request. That was his first request. Let me go. In other words, release me from the job. Yeah, I'm still going to be in your employment, but I will not work for you, if it makes any sense. And he said, yes, no problem. Imagine asking the guy you work for, I'll be working for you, but without working for you. Can I go away for a few years and come back, and then I'll keep working for you after I've gone away for a few years? But please pay me a salary still. I also said to the king, if it pleases the king, let me have letters addressed to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates rivers, instructing them to let me travel safely through the territories on my way to Judah. The second request is for an endorsement from the king to say when Nehemiah travels, it is as if the king travels. So if you mess with Nehemiah, you mess with the king of Babylon. Big deal. So he says, please essentially endorse my travel, which he does. And 3, please give me a letter addressed to Asaph, the manager of the king's forest, instructing him to give me timber. And I will need to make beams. I will need it to make beams for the gates of the temple, fortress for the city walls, and for a house for myself. And the king granted this request, and he added an extra one. So he asked for 3 things. And the king adds a fourth one, which we read in verse 9. I'm just going to quickly skip there. The king, I should add, had sent along army officers and horsemen to protect me. So he asked for 3 things. The king gave him 4. What do you call that? Favor. Prayer and favor. Somehow that in this story all intertwine. End of verse 8 says, and the king granted this request. But then, watch this. This is the beautiful little note. Because the gracious hand of God was on me. Beautiful. Nehemiah, he's got a life of prayer and a life of gratitude. Do you have a life of gratitude? Don't have to say yes or no, but just think about it. Psalm 50, verse 3, or somewhere there, verse 23 says, it's at the end of chapter 50 is where God says to the writer, why do you bring me sacrifices? I don't need an extra cow. I don't need a lamb. What I do need is your gratitude. the God of the universe, couldn't care less about our human efforts, but he loves when we are thankful. Nehemiah here could have said, and it came to pass because I fasted in prayer for 4 months, because I'm so spiritual. Or it came to pass because I was so diligent in my work. We have this thing of thinking that if we do the right thing, the Lord will bless us. But we can't mess up, because if we mess up, he doesn't bless us. The truth is that his blessing, his gracious hand is upon us. It's got nothing to do with our performance. He is gracious, period. And here is so powerful how Nehemiah acknowledges this. And the king granted this request because the gracious hand of God was on me. Nehemiah acknowledges the source of the blessing is God and is not connected to his performance. Phenomenal. Verse 9. When I came to the governors of the province west of the Euphrates River, I delivered the king's letter to them. Verse 10. But when Sanballat, the Horonite, and Tobiah, the Ammonite official, heard of my arrival, they were very displeased that someone had come to help the people of Israel. And so here, this is the end. I've got 2 more things to say. So this is the end. And here, essentially, at the end of this passage, the story introduces the villains. You know, any good story needs a villain. So we have Nehemiah is the hero. The king is the benefactor, and now we have the villains. Actually, as the story unfolds, the villains, there's more villains than just these two. But for now, we introduce to Tobiah and Sanballat. Sanballat has really got a Sanballat. Really kind of a villain's name. You know, you couldn't think of a better villain's name. If you had to choose a name for a villain, it's Sanballat. Anyway, I don't know, just my imagination, I always thought this name couldn't be better. But here I want to draw your attention to something, is that favor does not mean smooth sailing. Favor does not equate to everything is going to be all right. It isn't. In fact, early, we haven't even started the story and we already encounter opposition. We have somehow, there's different train of thoughts, but one of the train of thoughts in the Christian world is that if it's from God, everything is smooth. Have you ever heard of that? It is from God, everything will be all right. All the doors will open because God really is an usher. He opens and opens, close. That's what he does, doesn't it? Isn't that his main occupation? To open and close the door for you, obviously. Because you are the center of his world. So he opens the door when you need it, and he closes the door when you don't need it. God is a genie. Huh? He isn't. Smooth sailing doesn't mean that we're in the will of God, and the opposite is true. Opposition doesn't mean that we're in the will of God either. When we move for the kingdom, opposition comes, obviously, because the enemy opposes the growth of the kingdom. But I just want to mention 2 things. The first one is that when the Bible speaks about opposition, earlier we spoke about dancing through the fire. When the Bible speaks about opposition and fire, let's say 99%, is about opposition and fire that comes when you're moving in the kingdom of heaven and you advance in the kingdom of heaven. This is an important detail. In other words, Paul was preaching the gospel and he ends up in prison. He's in prison, why? Because of the gospel. Now what we do, we have taken that opposition in our westernized Christianity and we equate it to our personal battles. Now, personal battles, let me just define this, and hopefully I'm not going to offend too many people, but personal battles, in my opinion, come out of 3 things. We let the cross shape us. We get saved and we let the cross shape us. So we have a work of sanctification in us, and as that work of sanctification progresses, it hurts. It is fire, indeed. Okay. Number 1. Number 2, we made some bad choices. I ate too much pizza yesterday. I am troubling with my tummy today. It's not the devil's fault. Or rather, if the pizza is the devil, by all means. But I don't think, but you get my point. Poor choices. And now we want God to fix our tummy. But, sorry, you should just eat too much pizza. But we are so self-absorbed, we don't see that. And the two things, we are driven by our desires. Not all our desires are from God. Wow, that's a shocking revelation. It is true. So I guess I would like to challenge our understanding of opposition and struggle. Because as I grow older, I realize that the language of the believers equates struggling, personal struggle that got nothing to do with the kingdom, to kingdom struggles. We equate the people persecuted in some parts of the world because of the gospel to my own personal struggle because I want a better car or want a better tomorrow. Or I did some silly things when I was younger and I will carry on those consequences. You get the point. This is a bit sticky because there's a lot of gray area in between. I don't want to sound too harsh because, again, in all of this, God is involved and can use anything for our good to make us growth. And then His work, the work of the cross, kind of grows in us. But us blaming the enemy for things that we did doesn't help us because we don't grow, because it is His fault. He gave me the pizza. It wasn't my idea. I don't even like pizza. Come on, we do that. We do stupid things and then, oh, this is the woman. I didn't even like apples and she gave me the apple. So let's wrap this up. The elevator pitch of Nehemiah, what does it tell us? For me, the most overwhelming things that it tells us is that he has a life of dependency. He has a life of dependency. He has a life for the kingdom. His heart was to see his people restored, not to further his own career or his own well-being. Do you have a heart to see people restored? Do you have a heart for the kingdom? This morning at the prayer meeting, where is Natasha? Natasha had this thing, the first thing first. Seek first the kingdom of God and all these things shall be added. So if I look at Nehemiah and what his speech tells me about him in those 60 seconds, it tells me this speech that his priority is the kingdom. Is the kingdom your priority? Or you're blinded by your desires? See, life of dependency is in opposite to a life of independence. We love independence. In fact, David writes in his most famous psalm, Psalm 51, my rebellion haunts me every day. My rebellion haunts me every day. A life of dependency is a daily life of choosing the kingdom and dependency on Him. Your will be done. Your kingdom first. What the elevator pitch tells me, Nehemiah's elevator pitch tells me, is that Nehemiah understood something. That it wasn't about the stuff out there, was about the stuff in his heart. His heart was for him. His heart was for him. His heart wasn't for the king of Babylon. His heart was for the King of Kings, the one only Lord. And let me just conclude this and then I'm done. Do you know that the book of Nehemiah is part actually of a larger book? Originally it was written by one author and it includes Ezra. So Ezra and Nehemiah is actually one book. And if you read these two books together, it tells you of 3 returns. The 3 times the Jews from Babylon go back to Israel. Firstly with Zerubbabel, then with Ezra, and then with Nehemiah. But all 3 times, after these incredible reformation, social and religious reformations, this incredible restoration of first the temple, then the wall, okay, you get the point? All 3 stories ends always in the same way. that the people lives the Lord's way. It's actually disconcerting if you see these three stories parallel and you see they all ended the same way. When Nehemiah goes back, years later, after he's rebuilt the walls, he discovers the people have left the Lord's way. Because the point is a transformed heart. The point isn't what's going on around us, our circumstances to be improved. The point is your heart transformed. Because in Israel's case, the heart was not transformed, and that kept on going in the same ways, the same pattern. Our heart is transformed when we pursue the kingdom first, and our personal stuff gets addressed, don't worry. When we are furthering the kingdom, we are also transformed personally. You get that difference? But if we seek personal transformation of improvement, we don't get busy with the kingdom. Because we're so absorbed with our own stuff. In conclusion, we can read the whole book of Nehemiah. We can do this series, these 6 weeks or 7 weeks, and miss the point. The book of Nehemiah is about an individual that chose the kingdom of heaven. That's it. And in doing so, brought a whole lot of reformation to an entire nation. Do you choose the kingdom of heaven? Or are you self-absorbed in the kingdom of your life? So, I would like you to stand. I'm finished. I just want to pray a few things. But I would like, if you don't mind, all of you to stand.